Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live webinar brought to you by immigrationquestion.com, your trusted source for immigration news, expert legal insights, and real time conversations with experienced immigration attorneys. My name is Anisya Mukherjee, and I'll be your host for today's session Criminal Convictions and Immigration Status. What you need to know in 2025. If you or someone you love has a criminal record and is also trying to stay in the US, whether through a green card, visa, or deportation defense, today's session is for you. A criminal conviction, whether from last year or a decade ago, can dramatically impact your immigration journey. But it doesn't necessarily mean the journey is over. In fact, knowing your rights, options, and legal strategies can make all the difference. Today, we are honored to be joined by attorney Wendy Barlow, a New York based immigration attorney for more than a decade of experience handling everything from adjustment of status to complex federal appeals and deportation defense. Attorney Barlow has helped hundreds of families protect their futures and even when past mistakes threatened their ability to remain in the US. Attorney Barlow, thank you so much for being with us again. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
Thank you. Before we dive in, a quick but important reminder ImmigrationQuestion.com is a two in one platform that connects users with licensed immigration attorneys. We are not a law firm and are not affiliated with AILA or USCIS. All legal services are provided independently by attorneys in our network. Now let's jump right in. Attorney Barlow, can you start by explaining what a criminal conviction is, even an old one, and how it can impact someone's immigration status in 2025? And what's changed recently that people should be aware of?
Okay, sure. So a criminal conviction essentially is if you, most times you've been arrested. Sometimes you're not arrested, you turn yourself in. But if you've ever gone through the criminal court system and at the end of the day, you've been given some kind of punishment. Usually, you're either found guilty by a judge or a jury, or you've entered a guilty plea. You can also enter what's called a nolo contendere plea. Um, that's essentially a plea where don't you don't contest the charges. So, and then at the end of that day, some kind of punishment's put into place, whether there's a fine, jail time, probation, community service. Um, there's lots of different things, like a drug or alcohol rehab program, an anger management program. So that's basically what a conviction is. Um, Even if you do the nolo contendere, where you do not admit guilt, for immigration purposes, that is a conviction. I will just preface that some juvenile matters are not convictions. If your matter happened when you were under 18, it's very important to have that reviewed by an experienced immigration lawyer, because depending on the state, for example, if you had a juvenile adjudication in New York, that's not a conviction for immigration purposes, because there's no finding of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So that is state by state. So just make sure in those special circumstances, you definitely talk to someone. Um, as for what they can do, it really depends on what it is. I know a lot of people are like, well, I didn't go to jail. That doesn't matter. Or nobody was hurt. Again, it doesn't matter. When it comes to immigration, criminal convictions are, beside any criminal conviction can be applied as a negative factor for discretion. Most immigration applications, even if you're eligible, you have to show that as a matter of discretion, you should be granted that application. So, for example, they will grant you a green card application as a matter of discretion. So, any conviction can be considered in that. Now, if you have one, it's older, it's for drunken disorderly or maybe a petty theft, you'll probably get through adjustment of status without a problem. The problems become when you hit what are called crimes involving moral turpitude, which is a very long name for something that's not well defined. Essentially, it's crimes that would shock the conscience. Well, you can argue that a lot of crimes would shock the conscience, but they're not all CIMTs. But think about it as things theft, purposely like assault, like purposely harming another person, selling drugs. There's a lot of different ones, but that and crimes involving moral turpitude depend if you have multiple or you have ones that you've served the potential sentence was a year or more in jail, that can get you from keep you from getting an immigration benefit. Then you have aggravated felonies, and those are not necessarily felonies. I know the name says felony, but it does not have to be an actual felony. And that's a delineated list of crimes that essentially the US government has said are so bad that we're pretty much not going to let you stay here or get a green card. There are some exceptions, there are some waivers under certain circumstances, but in general, those are very bad. That's things like drug trafficking, murder, um, serious domestic violence and crimes of violence, like where you serve a year or more in jail, theft offenses, burglary offenses where you serve more than a year in jail, fraud involving more than $10,000, which nowadays you can hit $10,000 very easily in a fraud case. Um, those are very serious and they can lead to essentially a permanent bar to any immigration benefits. And then you have some specific offenses that can lead to deportation, like a firearms offense, stalking, or other domestic violence related crimes, not just the actual, battery, but stalking does rise to that. Um, and so these things can either lead to your deportation if you already have some kind of status here, or they can lead to not only your deportation, but your ineligibility for any benefits. Um, how it applies depends on what you've been convicted of. Um, and we don't have enough time to go through every crime today. So,
Definitely. So there's a lot of confusion out there. What types of crimes are most likely to lead to deportation or denial of a green card or visa? And are there specific categories that are especially high risk?
well, aggravated felonies are really high risk. Controlled substance offenses. Um, and we see that a lot, especially as more and more states legalize, for example, the use of marijuana. Well, it's not federally legal. So if you get convicted of federal offenses involving marijuana, you can have serious problems, even though, like, for example, in New York, it's fine. Obviously certain quantities, but like personal use is allowed. You can go into a dispensary and purchase without any issues, and you can use it, and you're not going to have a problem in the state of New York. But if let's say you left it in your bag and you're getting on an airplane, you could have problems. So those are particularly hard. Crimes involving violence, especially if it's a domestic um, violence type crime. And domestic violence doesn't just mean your wife or your children. It can be someone you have children with and you're not together anymore. It can be a person that you're not married to, but you're living together. So it depends on the state law again, but any crime of violence is usually a significant issue. Now, again, it depends on the degree. There are obviously different states, different degrees, but those generally will trigger problems. Along that line, murder, manslaughter, they're also crimes of violence. And then, like serious theft and fraud. We see a lot of individuals who, unfortunately, they're actually green card holders and they get wrapped up into some kind of essentially get rich quick scheme. Um, and it's like a tax fraud scheme. I've seen that. I've seen different credit card and business fraud schemes. And next thing you know, they're facing, they're involved in this scheme. It's a conspiracy. So it involves hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. And now they're facing deportation because of this. And pretty much a lot of them are limited to only being eligible to stay here if they can show it's more likely than not they will be tortured in their home country. That's a really high standard for most of the world. Um, it's, are there people we've been successful in getting that for? Yes, but it's not the majority. Some individuals do have eligibility for a waiver, but again, it's a very narrow class. And then the last one, mostly with all these problems, can cause problems with visas, getting a visa. But another one that causes a problem for a visa that's not as much of a problem for deportation and right now, DUI or DWI. Because when they see one of those on your record, usually the consulate makes you get screening to make sure you are not a substance abuser, because that is a ground of inadmissibility. So you have one of those, let's say you've been here on an H-1B visa. One night you go out with your friends, you drink a little too much, you get pulled over, you get a DUI. Now you're going back to get a new H-1B visa. Do not be surprised if you are sent for further medical examination to determine if you have a drinking problem. Um, and depending on what the doctor says, you could end up not getting your visa. Um, but in general, you have to be very careful if you've been arrested. And it doesn't matter if it says misdemeanor or if it's a felony. The best thing I can tell people is if you've been arrested and you are not a citizen, whether you're in the green card process, you're undocumented, you're applying for naturalization, you're here as a visitor, whatever it may be, before you plead guilty, go to trial, whatever, talk to an experienced immigration attorney. Your criminal attorney, you have to keep in mind, their job is usually to keep you out of as much trouble as possible. Keep a sentence, like keep you out of jail, keep you out of, if you're going to have to go to jail because there's no way around it, minimize that. Well, sometimes you're pleading to stuff that's actually worse for immigration. And we've been successful at talking ahead of time with attorneys and structuring plea deals that kind of, maybe it doesn't take the risk away, but it minimizes it or at least opens up relief versus you've already pled guilty and now you're stuck with this conviction. Um, so don't take it lightly just because, oh, it was just a DUI, they're going to find me and I got to take some alcohol classes. It's not that simple.
All right. Thank you. For someone already facing a removal because of a conviction, what legal options or forms of relief still might be available to help them stay in the US? Is it ever too late to fight back?
So the first thing, whenever we have someone who comes in and they're facing removal specifically because of a criminal charge, the first thing we do is we analyze whether or not the Department of Homeland Security is right. Um, Sometimes you will find someone in removal proceedings facing allegations that they've committed a crime that's an aggravated felony or a crime involving moral turpitude. And you can find case law that says, no, that's actually not one of those things. So, first and foremost, see if you can challenge the ground of removal. Um, that's the starting point. Now, that's not always an option because sometimes it's just not an out. The other thing is, especially when it's about being deportable. So let's say you're already here with a green card and they're trying to take your green card away and remove you. It's the government's burden to show that you are deportable. So make them prove it. Um, for example, if it's a fraud offense, because we've talked about that, and they're charging you as an aggravated felon for a fraud offense, do they have proof that it was over $10,000? If they can't sustain over $10,000, it's not an aggravated felony. If it's, um, as much as I hate to talk about this type of case, if it's a sexual abuse of a minor, they have the burden to prove the age of the minor in question. And under federal law, it's 16, not 18 for their purposes. And again, it's a technicality, but you can win on technicalities if the government doesn't prove it. Now, if they can prove it, then you have to move, or you're asking for relief, then it's your job to show why you should be able to stay. And you do. There are some things, there are waivers. So, for example, there's a waiver under INA 212H. It waives a lot of crimes, including aggravated felonies You have to meet some residence requirements, and you also have to have served less than 5 years in jail to be eligible. But it is something, it requires you to show extreme hardship to a qualifying relative, usually a parent or spouse who is a green card holder or citizen. There's also cancellation of removal for lawful permanent residents. So if you already have a green card and you've committed a crime, you may be eligible for cancellation of removal. Um, a lot of times, I can't say it's always granted, it depends on the record, but if you only have one crime and have otherwise been doing good, or especially if this crime has happened a while ago, you're likely to get it. There is also forms of relief like asylum, withholding of removal, and relief under the Convention Against Torture. Um, Again, depending on aggravated felony or not, you know, asylum is off the table if it's an aggravated felony, but with other things, you may still have other options. So it's not the end if you have a conviction. The other thing you can look at doing, it gets a little harder in removal, especially if you're detained because of the timetable of case processing. But you can also seek to possibly vacate your conviction. Um, in some circumstances, uh, primary, I mean, it could be include misdemeanors, but for example, most places, pretty much every state, if it's a felony conviction, you have to be advised of potential immigration consequences before you enter your plea. Otherwise, your guilty plea is not knowing. Now, this is not for every crime that ever happened because this is based on a Supreme Court case. Um, I'm trying to remember the date it came out, and off the top of my head, it's not sticking. But even if it was before that Supreme Court case, some states have similar cases that you can use. You can also look at pardons. You can go to the governor and ask for pardon. If it's federal, you can go to the federal government and ask for pardon. Um, in some states, for example, we talked about marijuana legalization. A lot of those states, when they legalize marijuana for certain convictions involving maybe like simple possession or small time sales, we're not talking about, the people who were importing pounds of this stuff, but for a lot of those lower level individuals, they also added provisions that allow you to seek to vacate those convictions. Um, so it really is, with criminal cases especially, very important to have it analyzed by an experienced immigration attorney and someone who deals with the intersection of criminal law and immigration law. I always tell people, first off, I am not a criminal defense attorney. You do not want me representing you in criminal court. However, I can work with your criminal attorney on potentially negotiating pleas that help you, or if you are already convicted, helping you try to figure out if there's a way to stay. But again, I don't step foot in criminal court. So
Right, perfect.
I think I
That's
got through all your questions there.
definitely. Thank you very much, Attorney Barlow. This session has been so far very insightful. To everyone joining us from Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, thank you for being here. Whether you're a legal professional, community advocate, or someone looking to understand this better, we're grateful to have you. And if this is your first time with us, welcome. We are immigrationquestion.com, a two-in-one platform built with lead and case management features to help simplify the immigration process. Though we are not affiliated with AILA, we are trusted by a lot of AILA attorneys who use our platform. Also, with immigrationquestion.com, you can ask your immigration questions for free in any language and get connected with a licensed attorney for legal guidance. And yes, just like many of our users, you may also receive a free initial consultation. Just visit www.immigrationquestion.com to learn more. And it gets better. We've just launched our new mobile app designed to make access even easier, whether you're a user or an attorney. Now, Attorney Barlow, with your extensive experience spanning over a decade in immigration litigation, including adjustment of status, complex federal appeals, and deportation defense, how would you describe the impact immigrationquestion.com is having on the immigrant community? and immigration attorneys like yourself?
I think it's having a good impact. I I I always tell people the internet's a great resource, but obviously it doesn't replace attorneys. But sometimes it's a great starting point, especially when individuals English is not their first language. Having a platform where you can ask a question in your native language where you can fully explain yourself, I think is very helpful. And ultimately may help you either maybe it's something quick and you can get that answer you need and it's over with, or it can help get you in touch with someone who could help you because you need more help. It wasn't just a quick little answer, yes or no. So it is a good tool to help people link up. I think episodes like these live streams, and not just because I'm sitting here on and one, but I think they're also helpful too. Again, they're not replacements for a case specific analysis, but it lets you understand the specific topic a little bit and get a grasp from someone who does do this every day. My goal, you know, I went into law to help people, so this is the seeing other tools like this are great, especially because there is on the other side of things so much garbage on the internet um, related to immigration. So I think still having the ability to access a real attorney is a good thing. Again, either whether it's just that you need that simple question answered, like where do I find the filing fees? That's easy. I can send you a link to post that. I don't need to help you do it. I can tell you where to find it. If it's I've been arrested for this charge, the prosecutor's offering this deal if I plead guilty, will I be able to stay? That's going to need talking to someone in depth a little bit more about your situation. So I think this is a good resource for people.
Thank you for that. And now we're moving into our live Q&A session. So if you've got questions for Attorney Barlow, now is your moment. Drop your questions in the chat or call us live at 516-703-3483.
I do see one question there. It's not related to the criminal, but I can actually answer this one. Um, in general, it shouldn't be an issue, especially since she's not filed for anybody for immigration purposes in the past. If she'd done three petitions for people, that might get a little questionable. Still not doesn't mean it's it's not going to go forward, but it may raise a little more scrutiny if every spouse she's filed for. You should have no problem. You just need to make sure that you do document that you and your wife entered the marriage in good faith. Um, you have to disclose all the marriages and provide all the documentation that she was divorced before she married you, or if her marriage ended because a former spouse passed away, the death certificate. But overall, you shouldn't have any problem with USCIS just because she's been married 3 times.
All right, next question is, I got arrested for a DUI 5 years ago and paid my fines. Can I still apply for a green card?
Assuming it is a simple DUI, and I know that this is not you probably want a more direct answer, but assuming it's a simple DUI, you were just over the limit, there was no property damage, no injury to persons, you've taken care of everything, you will likely be okay to file for a green card. Now, if you have that DUI and a history of DUIs before that or after that, or maybe not DUIs, but drunk and disorderly, that could go to substance abuse and alcohol abuse questions. So just, be careful there. But one simple DUI 5 years ago with everything taken care of, you should be okay to file for your green card.
All right. Next question is, does an exposed conviction still count against me in immigration? My record was sealed 10 years ago.
Yes, it does. We get this a lot. Expunged records or expunging a conviction is great for purposes of like employment, um, but it is immigration still sees expunged records, so you still have to disclose them on forms, and it can still be used against you if it is a crime that would make you ineligible or deportable. So expunging a record is not enough. If you're seeking an immigration benefit, please make sure you're checking with an attorney first. Like if it's a green card, make sure if you need a waiver, you're filing that waiver. If it's naturalization, you may just need to disclose it and it's not going to be an issue. It's just going to depend on what stage in the process you are.
All right, thank you for that. Next question is it true I can lose my US citizenship if they find out about a conviction I didn't mention in my applications or application?
It is true. That is something that probably wouldn't have been too much of a concern in prior administrations, but the Trump administration has announced a potentially aggressive policy for denaturalization, and providing false information on your naturalization application is one of the grounds. Whether they will devote the time and energy for you specifically, it's probably going to depend on what the crime was, when it happened, um, and ultimately how aggressive. We have not seen anybody that we have either worked with or currently working with or have contacted us about denaturalization, but they did announce this policy about a month ago that denaturalization was definitely something they were going to look to start using more frequently. It is expensive, by the way, for the government, even though it's the government, to actually put someone in denaturalization proceedings. So we'll see how much they use it, especially if it was something that was a like petty type offense.
All right, perfect. Next question is if I'm in immigration court, can I get a free lawyer like in criminal court?
There is no constitutional right to a free attorney in immigration court. There are services that do provide pro bono and low cost services to individuals, usually in the court itself, or you can go to the immigration court's website. They do keep a list of the pro bono and low fee providers in the area. Um, for example, one that's in a lot of different areas is Catholic Charities. Depending on your age, there's also an organization called Kind, but they deal with children. So there are services out there. The biggest thing I can tell you is get the list in your area and call them all. Um, but also at the same time, please be prepared to either wait quite a while to see someone because their services are in demand, or that they may not be able to take you, especially if it involves criminal matters. A lot of these organizations, not all, but a lot, do not handle cases that have convictions as a reason of removal. Um, you can talk to different lawyers. I know immigrant representation by any lawyer is not necessary. It's not inexpensive. It is something you will pay for. But I know for a fact, for example, our office, we do allow for payment plans with our clients. And we're not the only ones that do that. So I'm not just selling myself here. So if you can't find someone, talk to some, private attorneys, because you may be able to work out something that you can actually afford, because it's better to have an attorney than not. You can find statistics online that if you have an attorney, your chances of success do increase dramatically.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Next question, please. If I'm in immigration court, same question actually. Can I get a free lawyer like in criminal court? Yeah.
Again, no free lawyers for immigration court, no required ones. Apparently, this is a popular question.
Yeah, it's coming up 3 times. Oh, here it is. Do I have to disclose a conviction that happened outside of the US?
You do. Um, Most of the applications that you will fill out with U.S. immigration, whether it's a visa application with the State Department or an application with USCIS, will ask you if you've ever been arrested, charged, or convicted of a crime in the United States or anywhere in the world. So that will specify anywhere. You will have to disclose it. If you do not, it can lead to not only a denial, but a finding that you made a material misrepresentation. And while your conviction may not have hurt you, that's a permanent bar that requires a waiver to come back. So make sure you're disclosing it. The impact and the eligibility for waivers, it will depend on the actual crime.
All right, perfect. Next question, please. They said I missed a court date for a charge I never knew I had. Can that affect my asylum claim?
If you were ultimately convicted or you have an outstanding like bench warrant, it can be a problem. You can find yourself being arrested um, at an ICE check-in if you're under that, or even at your interview. If you didn't show up for court, the best thing I can tell you is straighten it out. If you didn't get a date and you go to criminal court and you explain it, oftentimes that bench warrant will go away and you'll be able to proceed on the case. If you were convicted in your absence, which is doesn't happen as often because it's a high bar, um, then that's a bigger. You're going to need a criminal attorney to work on vacating that conviction.
All right. That is the end of our questions. Thank you so much,
All right.
Attorney Barlow. This has been an incredibly insightful session. And thank you again to our audience for joining us. And thank you, Attorney Barlow, for your practical strategies and insights you've brought to today's discussion. We hope this conversation gave you clarity on navigating your immigration journey. Don't forget at immigrationquestion.com, you can ask your immigration questions for free and get in touch with a licensed attorney who understands your case. You may also be eligible for a free initial consultation. So head over to www.immigrationquestion.com and sign up today. And if you want to revisit this session or share it with a colleague, you can catch the replay on Spotify. Just search Borderless Talk by immigrationquestion.com. Join us again on Wednesday for another enlightening conversation. Trust us, you don't want to miss it. Once again, thank you so much, Attorney Barlow. We can't wait to have you back again.
Thank you for having me. More than welcome to come back. Have a
Yeah.
great day to everyone who listened or who decides to listen on Spotify.